Welcome, dear all. Her Excellency, Honorable Ambassador Anka Feldhusen from Kiev will join us now. Dear guests, dear friends, I have the distinct honor of welcoming a truly esteemed guest today, joining us online from Kiev. Mrs. Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany in Kiev, Mrs. Anka Feldhusen. On behalf of the Young Security Conference, it is my privilege to extend a warm welcome to you. Ms. Ambassador heads the German embassy and is probably the most experienced Western ambassador when it comes to Ukrainian issues and has already had her third posting in Kiev. In particular, no other European ambassador has experience working in Ukraine, both during the war in 2014 and now since 2 years. Ms. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I hope you can all hear me very well. A warm welcome from Kyiv, where we have summer today, but where we have spent another half-sleepless night. One of the very, very many since 27th of April this year. And especially since last October when the missile attacks started. But one thing I always keep reminding Berlin, the missile war started actually on the 24th of February last year. But as Amelie rightfully said, I have been here also when Russia actually invaded Ukraine for the first time in 2014. I had been working as deputy ambassador then already since 2010. I had lived through the whole revolution of dignity. And I very vividly remember how we somehow missed the beginning of all this. I remember how I was in parliament. We were all together with the Ukrainians, especially with people from Kyiv, kind of licking our wounds after the revolution of dignity had ended kind of miraculously well, but with the death of more than 100 people on Maidan. And we were all busy trying to make the country continue to run. There was a temporary president. And I remember being in front of a TV set in the parliament with the foreign minister then, and we were watching on the 27th of February news from Crimea about the Green Man. And we were completely shocked. And by then it was already too late. On March 16th, 14, Crimea was officially annexed with the referendum. So yes, I do go a long way, so bear with me if sometimes I get into some anecdotes, but there are a few messages I would really like to bring to your attention. As I said, the war started in 2014, and it started with the annexation of Crimea, and then it went on with the first Russian troops inside Ukraine in July, August 2014, after Ukrainian, mainly volunteer battalions, had liberated a lot of the territory that had been taken by, as we called them, separatists from Donbass. And I was sitting in my office every day seeing the map and thinking, okay, very soon Donbass will be entirely Ukrainian again. And this is when Russian soldiers invaded the Battle of Ilovaisk that led to the first Minsk agreement in September 2014. And then the Battle of Debaltsevo in February 2015 that led to the second Minsk agreement. And you all know, since you've done your homework, how engaged Germany and France were in the Normandy format, how our leaders tried to convince Russia and Ukraine to find a solution for what most of people called a conflict. But it was a war already then. And when I was chosen as ambassador in spring 2019, I did remind people that it's not a conflict, that it's a war, and that almost every day people were still dying on the front line. That was not called the front, it was called the contact line. So I came to Ukraine with this very specific view. This all said, and my embassy and I, we worked hard to make the Minsk agreements become a success, even though it was clearer and clearer to us that it was mainly a means to manage the conflict and not to solve the war that Russia had already unleashed on Ukraine. We did what embassies do. We followed a new government, a new president, a new government in Ukraine. The pandemic came and we were all very busy with that. And then the first escalation came in April 21, when Russia already gathered more than 100,000 soldiers on Ukrainian borders. That was kind of a little bit de-escalated, but not very much. And then other things became important again. And when in November 21, for the first time, allies said there are a lot of Russian soldiers on the front line, on the border. There might be another invasion. It was a little bit like the frog that is in the water already, and then the water is starting to heat. From November until February, things were escalating, but we were at the same time doing the job we were always doing. President Zelensky, and I can understand that, rightly tried to kind of de-escalate in his own public opinion, because in January 22, it was already clear that even though no Russian tank had yet moved into Ukraine, the Ukrainian economy was already in pretty free fall, minus 10% by the end of January. And I have to say, even though, as Ms. Amelie said, I am a rather experienced diplomat in Ukraine, I also did not exactly believe that Russia would again invade Ukraine. For one simple reason, Putin had made the same mistake in 2014, and although then the Ukrainian armed forces were much weaker than in 22, after they had had years of training with partner nations, some weapons that had already been delivered. He had not succeeded in getting a land bridge to Crimea in 2014. And I was sure he was smart enough to understand that with much stronger Ukrainian armed forces, it wouldn't work. I was wrong, as many, many others. And the war started on 24th of February, and I had to leave with my little team that was left to Poland. I'm going to leave that bit. We came back in May, and here come my main messages. And I think our talk will be mainly about what is actually Ukraine expecting after victory, because all of us who live here in Kyiv, even ambassadors from countries where you perhaps might think their capitals are a little bit reluctant, those who live here, we know that this is a war that Russia started against Ukraine. And we feel with the Ukrainians that this must end in a victory. Russia cannot be rewarded by gaining territory in a peace that would not be a just peace. So we all are in our hearts with the Ukrainians and with their battle, and we know that Ukrainians need to get to gain initiative on the battlefield again. We are all watching the military events. As I said, we're also experiencing the increased Russian attacks in terms of missile attacks, also on Kyiv, even though the rockets are all shot down. The air defense is working really well. And at the same time, the Ukrainian government goes its way towards the vision they have of a post-war Ukraine. And that vision is definitely, and has been so in these last years, basically since 2014, of a European Ukraine that is part of the EU and preferably also part of NATO. When I came back, it was still a matter of discussion if the Ukrainian request for membership in the EU would be discussed in a positive way. But by the end of June, it was clear that Ukraine would get candidate status for the EU. And that, I think, was next to all the military successes that Ukraine achieved, the liberation of the Kyiv region and Chernihiv region, Kharkiv, Kherson in autumn then in 22, the acceptance as a EU candidate to membership was, I think, what really changed probably here what is going to happen in the next years dramatically. Ukraine had always wanted to become a member of the EU, but I think it was in this special situation with the special political support that Ukraine is experiencing in the EU and in many countries of the rest of the world that led to the fact that Ukraine is now preparing to open membership discussions with the EU. This will or will not happen at the end of this year, and we're all waiting for the first comment of the EU Commission on the first 7 steps that needed to be kind of taken by the Ukrainian government. I expect a pretty positive, I think, comment, and then it will be up to the European Council at the end of the year to decide on the opening of membership discussions. I have a very personal view on this. I think it will give the EU leverage and much more leverage if we start membership negotiations with Ukraine, because fulfilling 7 steps or looking at the EU acquis in each of the chapters that need to be opened and closed is a completely different thing. And I think this Ukrainian government knows that they have very experienced people in negotiations with the European Union because of the association agreement that has really helped Ukraine to progress a lot already. They know that it will be hard work to open and close chapters and implement EU acquis. But I think it is only possible to do it that way, because the way I have experienced the Ukrainian people in the now 12 years that I have lived here is Ukrainians are extremely good in dealing with problems that jump right into their face. They are creative, inventive, resilient, strong, and they are joined in their fight. And we've seen that especially since 24th of February. But the same is true for politics. One of my colleagues, who is also from a former Soviet republic, just put it, is that everybody was laughing at the Soviet 5-year plan. So everything that bears the title plan or strategy is not being taken seriously in this part of the world. So don't even expect from Ukraine to think much ahead. They need to see what they have to do. And I think in that sense, it would be great and motivating for everybody if membership negotiations could start at the end of this year or beginning of next year. But we will all see that together. So much on EU membership. Let me perhaps say a few words on NATO membership. You all know that Ukraine is very eager to also get some new quality here of messaging from the Vilnius summit in June in Vilnius. We will see how this will end. I think what is really important is that Ukraine needs to get guarantees that ensure the country to, first of all, win this war, and then to make sure that Russia can never attack again. And this is mainly weapons. And this is what the broader West and Germany among the West and also the EU with the European Peace Facility and NATO with its support has done for the last 15 months. Ukraine has received a lot of weapons, and they have been extremely good in using them. This will continue. You have probably seen what Germany pledged at Mr. Zelensky's visit in Berlin on May 14th. And you've also seen what the Bundestag has voted. And I think this is even more important than the last really substantial package. The Bundestag has voted around 10 billion euros in the next 8 years in the support for Ukraine in the military field. This gives Ukraine reassurance that we will continue to help it, and that gives possibilities for long-term planning. And one of the long-term planning that Germany is doing is definitely in the sphere of air defense. And I think this is very important because, and that brings me perhaps to another sector, Ukraine will need to get on its feet again, also economically. For the time being, the US and the EU every month are giving 1.5 billion euros to Ukraine in order to make sure social security can be paid, pensions can be paid, just to help the state running. This does not go to the military. This is really only for social expenses. This will need, will stop at some point. I know our societies, there will be other issues that come up in our societies. The Ukrainian economy has to be rebooted. And for that, really almost, I would say perfect air defense is necessary. And I think the German RST systems have really contributed since the beginning, since the first one was delivered in autumn 2022, to make Ukrainians feel more secure, especially Kyiv is well protected. Even if you know that last night, again, millions were shot into the air in terms of air defense missiles, that has all saved people's lives. So this is important, and this is something that Germany is definitely going to concentrate on together with the tanks that we have started to deliver. So security guarantees, before we can even think of NATO membership, because this will be a political decision that needs to be taken by all NATO members. And finding a compromise among so many people, so many countries, is always difficult. The good thing about compromises is the same for the EU. So they usually are then reliable. You can count on them, that they will not be changed again. But in the beginning now, Ukraine needs more guarantees that it can withstand Russia and then not be attacked again. Perhaps one last word to the economic situation. And I'm really happy. German companies have always been really invested in Ukraine. There were more than 2,000 being active here. Many also small and medium-sized enterprises. And most of them have continued working. Some even now continue investing, like, for instance, Bayer or Knauf, that are building new factories in their sphere of activity here. But Germany has also made it known to companies that the investment guarantees, the federal guarantees that we do give to companies that would invest in Ukraine, would also cover direct war threats like missile hits. With this, we are one of the first countries, if not the very first country here, to give such guarantees to companies that want to invest here. And I'm happy here to hear that there are already several dozen of requests to get these federal guarantees, these investment guarantees. So I do hope, and the potential of Ukraine has stayed the same, war or no war. This is mainly in the energy field, this is in the automotive field, agriculture, of course, and also pharmaceuticals. The pandemic has taught us that it's better to have the main pharmaceutical products closer to home, not in China or India. So Ukraine has a lot of potential that it can use and that can help the country get on its feet again. This will be part of the reconstruction of the country. And I will close with this. Reconstruction is something that is really having us busy almost every day here, because it covers so many fields. In a way, the help we gave to the energy system that was under heavy attack between October and February is already part of the reconstruction, because, of course, we tried to give, for instance, transformers to Ukraine to replace transformers that were that are compatible with a modern system. And especially in the energy field, Ukraine has shown its capacities when it joined the EU energy system, energy grid, electricity grid, and so 3 weeks after the war had started. So before, people were saying, "Oh, it will take a few more years." No, Ukraine has done that even in conditions of war. So energy is a very important factor, and the kind of immediate ad hoc help that we have given this winter will also already contribute to make the whole system more reliable and less carbon-based and more modern. So I think since we started later, I will stop with this. We will have a panel. You will have to you will be able to ask questions, but I don't want to take away time from the panel. So I hope I could give you some kind of overview, and perhaps one last sentence on how the war really feels here, because from outside people usually think it's much worse when they come to Kyiv, especially, or the west of the country, say, it doesn't feel like war. Believe me, the war is very present, not only because we have to go to the shelter almost every night. Kyiv looks okay, but when you look further east, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, Odessa, or even closer to the front line, Kherson mainly, that is shelled every day. People are dying every day because Russia is continuing its brutal war of aggression. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ambassador. I have the huge pleasure to transition now to our panel.